Now, the government has forked out $1.1 billion on Christchurch's earthquakes. Some of that has been spent on residential claims, with the rest going to wage subsidies and job loss packages. But that's not enough, according to some who are saying more needs to be done to help Christchurch businesses. Joining me now from Parliament is the Prime Minister, John Key. Good morning, Prime Minister.
Morning, Rachel.
Is there any more room to move on this
Morning,
earthquake support subsidy? Can it be extended?
Well, we're not ruling that out, but I think it's important to understand the phase that we're actually going through. Initially, the government put up effectively wage subsidies, so we put up money, and we paid that either directly to employees or to companies, or directly to people that had lost their job. Now, that will have run for a 14-week period by the time the program is over. And what we're really trying to do at this point now is build up alternatives. So how can we actually facilitate those companies realistically having a business plan, getting back into operation? So the emphasis is changing away from subsidies to employees through to mentors, going out there, making sure we've got places that they can operate, residential space, all of that sort of stuff. So, look, I think it's just in a different phase.
OK. I guess, though, the reality is through no fault of their own, people have geared their lending, geared their lives around their pre-earthquake incomes. I think... No, there he is. He's back again. Sorry, Prime Minister, we just lost you there for a moment. But people have geared their lending and their lives around their pre-earthquake incomes. They're going to find themselves facing, very, very real and genuine hardship. The money is just going to dry up, isn't it?
Well, we need to acknowledge it's very tough for the people in Christchurch that have potentially lost their homes. Some very tragic cases lost loved ones and actually lost their jobs. Now, the government's trying to respond to that in a number of ways. Firstly, if you look at the normal unemployment benefit, that has significant conditions and strings attached to it. There's a stand-down period generally. It's income tested, obviously, any other income you might have, and it's paid at a basic rate. In Christchurch, we've waived a lot of those rules. We've also had a supplementary top-up payment we've been making to people. So we've been trying to allow people to make those adjustments that they'll need to make. The banks are also, in some instances, looking quite kindly on their customers. ASB, for instance, I know there was one bank that was giving their residential home borrowers a holiday on their repayments for a period of time. So I think we all acknowledge it's very difficult when someone goes to work one day, has a well-paid job, and then all of a sudden their job, through no fault of their own or the company's fault, is gone. OK, what's your advice then to the people, Prime Minister, people who've got families, who've got financial commitments, who won't be able to pay their mortgages or the rent and their bills when they now are on an unemployment benefit? What do they do? Well, I think in the first instance, make sure that they register everything for everything that's available to them. So the basic unemployment benefit, as I say, in Christchurch, is topped up. There are always other areas where we can assist people if required. I think the second thing is make sure you go and talk to your bankers. They're not being unsympathetic, as I understand it. They are helping people through. In many cases, it is a transition phase where we all have to acknowledge there's a bit of a state of flux in Christchurch where some businesses aren't operational. But if you take the casino, for instance, taking to the extreme, they're site-specific, they can't move their business and they can't operate because the copthorn over the road is dangerous and therefore endangers their operating environment. But on the other side of the coin, they're also very hopeful they'll be back in business by the end of May. So things are moving around quite rapidly. OK, Labor estimates around 20,000 will end up on the dole queue when that subsidy runs out. That's not an unreasonable expectation, is it? No one would have a clue where Clayton Cosgrove gets those numbers. I think he just pulls them out of a hat. All I can tell you is that when we looked at what was effectively the job loss scheme, there were about 7,500 people that went off that. So they were people that essentially recognised that their company was no longer there, their job was therefore gone, and they registered for a direct payment from the government. Now, of those 7,500 approximately, only 3,000 have transitioned onto a benefit. The rest have actually got other employment. So it's quite a fluid market. In New Zealand at any one time, people go on to the benefit each week, but about 2,000 people go off. Now, we acknowledge that Christchurch is a different environment, and it's harder to read at the moment. It's harder for companies to get established, but to still sit there and pick numbers is really very random and quite subjective. OK, why is the government, Prime Minister, so levy averse? It's worked across the Tasman in the wake of the Queensland floods. Julia Gillard just whacked a 0.5% levy on income over 50,000 and a 1% levy on income over 100,000.
Isn't a levy the most straightforward way of generating income here? Perhaps we could help out some of those people who are no longer eligible for that subsidy?
Okay, so for a start off, they probably have more wealthier people. That might help. And the actual quantum of the earthquake, or in their case the floods, I think it is, vis-a-vis their total economy, it's different proportions. So Christchurch is fundamentally a bigger event in New Zealand. But secondly, if you want to go and put that levy on, it won't stop borrowing, because you need to borrow up front. Because that's the way the accounting treatment will work, and that is the way the practicalities of the rebuild will work. So any levy that's put on would last anywhere between, probably, depending on how big it is, 10 and 15 years. So this is not a temporary levy. So when we go along and say, okay, let's put a levy on, let's say 1% for someone earning $50,000, that's going to that family and saying, well, you have to pay us $500. Now, yes, they might be able to do that, but working for families means if you have $50,000 and 2 children, you don't actually pay tax in New Zealand. So that's a recognition from the government that you don't have a lot of spare free cash anyway. So my view is, look, there are a couple of options. We either send everyone a bill, as you're proposing, through a levy, or we go out there and we're a bit more careful with our spending. And we think from New Zealand's point of view, that is the better option, and it's the fairer option actually for New Zealand taxpayers.
Right, let's just talk briefly about the Darren Hughes saga, Prime Minister. It's a goodie, isn't it? It seems to be going on forever, and they still haven't revealed his replacement. What's your take on that situation?
Well, that's a matter ultimately for the Labor Party. I haven't really engaged in that. I don't need to engage in that. It's for everyone to sort of see. I mean, ultimately, whether Labor take the next person on the list, is something that they, I guess, can manipulate, which is what they're doing at the moment.
National would be quite happy with Judith Tizard, Prime Minister.
Well, we'd be more than happy for her to come back if she wants to. But I mean, realistically, when Labor put together that list, that's what they were telling the public, that the next person on the list under the Labor Party was Judith Tizard. Now, we'll acknowledge that time changes things. Sometimes a couple of years on, people say, well, I don't necessarily want to take up the next spot. They're going down 5, so they've definitely sold a different bill of goods to people to what happened in 2008. But, that's the way it is, I suppose.
All right, Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Okay, thanks very much.